What's up, guys? My name is Blaze, and E3 has come and gone. It is the kind of the wrapping up of E3. It's Wednesday. It's June 12th, and I think that a lot of companies have pretty much presented their games for E3. I think there's definitely some excitement in the air. There's definitely some great games coming out very, very soon. And I thought, since everything's kind of winding down and wrapping up, it's a great time to really talk about the presentations and what I thought of the presentations of E3. So today we're going to run through a quick tier list of the E3 presentations and the games from the developers and everything like that. So let's go ahead and transition over to that scene. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. This is the tier list, the tier maker for E3 2019. These are all the developers on the bottom here, and now you'll notice that one thing I want to point out is Bethesda is not on here, and I'm going to be totally honest with you. I thought about putting them on the list, but I will say that I'm not a huge fan of Bethesda games. Not that they're bad games or that I don't like them, just that I personally don't play them and get a lot of enjoyment out of them. So I also didn't watch the presentation. I've heard some things, but I decided ultimately that it would not be fair for me to put Bethesda on here as a tier list, to give them a tier rating, because I don't play them, you know. And I think for me personally, I'd probably end up putting them at the bottom, and that may or may not be where they belong. So, you know, feel free to comment below where you thought Bethesda ended up if you are a fan. But I personally didn't find it fair to put them on the list, because I don't think that it's fair for me to rate them. So other than that, though, we do have 2K games right here. We've got EA, we've got Bandai Namco, CD Projekt Red, Konami, Microsoft, Nintendo, Sega, Square Enix, Ubisoft, and PlayStation. So I'm gonna get the obvious one out of the way first. We know for a fact PlayStation was not at the show. And I think that's a little disappointing, because they're a huge game company and they have a lot of great games, a lot of great potential to have, you know, whether it's Uncharted, God of War, or whatever the case may be, or to even just talk about and speculate about the new console. They didn't necessarily need to be at E3, but I feel like they probably should have at least gone and talked about something, you know, even if they're devoting all of their time and effort to the PlayStation 5. I think them not being there, it's weird. And I thought for sure they'd do some kind of state of play presentation during E3, that we'd see something or hear something from Sony, but they really didn't. So just to get those out of the way, I think just because they weren't there at the show, we're going to drop them in the D slot. We're going to give them the D, because, you know, it's not really fair necessarily to say that, you know, they had a good or bad presentation, but just from the get-go, and I knew that they weren't going to be there, but from the get-go, them not being there was kind of bad. I thought. I think that they needed that presence, and they didn't show it. Even if they just did a state of play, that would have been great, but they didn't do anything like that. So Sony, just to get them out of the way, I don't want to spend too much time talking about them, but they didn't even go. So there you go. Anyway, moving on. The next one I want to talk about is Microsoft. So Microsoft had a showing at E3. They talked about a few games. They talked about Gears of War. They talked about Halo. They talked about there's a Blair Witch game coming out. Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga is coming out for the Xbox. Battletoads was announced. They talked about Minecraft Dungeons, which actually looks pretty cool. It's coming to the Switch also, but they kind of showed that off during their presentation. Forza Horizon 4, including the Lego Speed Champions expansion. That was kind of neat. So I think overall, they also talked about Project Scarlet with Halo Infinite. So which is extremely exciting, and the potentials of what they can do with Project Scarlet is just astronomical. I'm really excited to see what they can do with the next generation of consoles, considering that, you know, games like Breath of the Wild are already so huge, but you can tell what kind of tricks they used to make that game as huge as it is. But just imagine, you know, not having to use tricks like that anymore. Just being able to have a huge open world like Breath of the Wild with no with no like low res polygons or low res models. You just have it all there in full high res, and zero load time. So fascinating stuff. Halo Infinite and Gears of War look amazing. So I just want to say that as far as Microsoft's presentation, I want to go ahead. I don't think it's fair to give them an S, because I don't think that Microsoft blew me away. I had a couple of situations at E3 where I did cry, where I was actually emotional at the games and I couldn't even speak because I was so excited. I didn't feel that way with Microsoft. So whatever companies that was are going to go into the S tier, but I didn't feel that way about Microsoft. So I think their presentation overall was very strong. They had some great games. They had some great stuff. So I'm going to drop them in the A+ tier because I think they really did a good job of making something good. So not a bad presentation. The next one I'm going to talk about is a smaller company. Take-Two and 2K. 2K Games is responsible for games like Borderlands, and they came out with a game called The Outer Worlds. I didn't see much about The Outer Worlds, but Borderlands is one of my favorite games, and I haven't really kept up on the announcements just yet. But I know they were there. I know they were showing off Borderlands. I'm going to drop them in the B+. Just because I know that Borderlands 3 is going to be an amazing game. There was a bunch of new information that came out for Borderlands, and they honestly, I think they had, just that one game alone is enough to make up for, not having anything else. I would have thought for sure they'd have had like 2K, 2K20 at the show, and they would have showed off some more sports games, but they really didn't. So that was a little surprising. But they do have, 2K. They do have Borderlands coming out, so that's gonna be pretty cool. I want to save EA for last, or not last, but closer to last. But let's skip them and go on to CD Projekt Red. CD Projekt Red showed off Cyberpunk 2077 and The Witcher 3. So that's a complete edition, I think, for the Wii or the Switch. I mean. I think they did a good job. I'm probably going to put them in the B tier here. I think it's a pretty standard, pretty good showing overall. Cyberpunk looks really good. Probably almost enough for it to be a B+, almost. They didn't have a bad show. It's kind of teetering in between these. But I think that Cyberpunk does look pretty good. I'm going to drop it in the B though, because I think that there is another game that looked a lot like Cyberpunk, that maybe not a lot like it, but that kind of reminded me of Cyberpunk in a way that I think looked better than Cyberpunk. So I don't think that Cyberpunk's gonna be a bad game. It's probably gonna be a very good game, but I'm gonna drop them in the B tier here because I think that Cyberpunk looks awesome, but I'm not sure how interested I am in the game. It'll probably go over well, and I'm sure there'll be sequels and stuff, so it is what it is. It almost looks like Far Cry in the future, but overall they were there, and they had a pretty good showing, I think, so nothing major. Konami, they really didn't show anything, to be honest. They were there, and they showed Contra Rogue Core, and they showed the Contra Anniversary Collection. That was it. So I mean, they were there, which is a step above Sony, so I don't think they really came out and did anything. And Contra is a great game, so let's not forget that Contra is a pretty cool game, and I think that they definitely have some cool ideas with Contra and where they're going with it. And I think that the Anniversary Collection looked fun too. So it's a blast from the past, and I'm not sure what else they could have done. They could have done some other games. I'm kind of surprised they didn't show anything else, though, to be honest. So I think C is pretty fair. When we get to the rest of the developers down here. So let's move on to Ubisoft. Ubisoft was at the show. They showed some trailers for a lot of games that I personally don't play. They showed off Ghost Recon Breakpoint, The Division 2, For Honor. They showed Roller Champions, which actually looks kind of cool. They showed Gods and Monsters. So they have a pretty good lineup for the holiday season this year and early next year. Assassin's Creed Odyssey is getting a game update as well. But the one game that really showed off what Ubisoft's capable of doing is Watch Dogs Legion. I think that was cool. Like they showed off Watch Dogs Legion, and that actually looks really, really cool. That you can recruit anybody from the world to help you take down this syndicate, this overpowered government thing. So I definitely want to give Ubisoft a good score, right above CD Projekt Red, because I think that Watch Dogs looks better than Cyberpunk. But I wouldn't give them any higher than 2K. I think that this is probably the best place for them right here in the B+ tier. They also showed off Just Dance, which it's kind of a huge game, even though I personally don't play it. I think it's got a huge following, and there's a lot of people that stream that game on a regular basis. So you know what, it is what it is. It's all good. But moving on to Sega, they showed off Panzer Dragoon Phantasy Star Online 2. Sega Genesis mini console coming September with mini games like Mega Man, Earthworm Jim, Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2, Echo the Dolphin, and 35 more classic games. I didn't see the Sega Genesis mini console, but I've already pre-ordered it and it is coming. But Phantasy Star Online 2 is one of my favorite games. Looks amazing. Can't wait to play it on PC and Xbox One. Panzer Dragoon looks pretty cool too. So if you played that game on the Sega Saturn, I think you're gonna have a heck of a time. I don't think that Phantasy Star has an enormous, vastly large player base, but it's got a pretty good sized player base. So I'm gonna give them a B+ also for their showing. I thought they did a decent job with their presentation. I have no issues with that. I do want to see Phantasy Star and the Sega Genesis Mini are going to be cool, but they really didn't show a whole lot of other games. Like Sonic Mania 2 would have been a good idea, but they kind of missed their chance on that. Even like a Monkey Ball, returning to the classic era of Monkey Ball, what made it fun would be cool. But kind of surprised they didn't show off more games, but it's all good. The other one was Namco Bandai. Namco Bandai, they had Tales of Arise, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, Code Vein, The Dark Pictures Anthology, and Rad. Didn't see Rad, but I saw Dragon Ball Kakarot, which looks really good. Tales of Arise looks cool. And the other two I don't really know much about, as far as I probably saw the trailer, but probably was too distracted by something else. So I'm going to give them a B. And I think really they actually have Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, which is the only game that looked really cool. Let's just say, they're better than Sony because they were at the show. They have 5 games, so I think that kind of puts them up a couple tiers. And then Dragon Ball Z Kakarot was one of those games, so I think that actually qualifies them to be up here with CD Projekt Red. They had a pretty decent showing of games, and I think they definitely put some good trailers out there. So that leaves 3 left. EA. I think you can probably all guess where I'm going to put EA. And EA was at the show, so they're automatically above Sony. I'm dropping them in the D+, only because they showed some games. They actually showed Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, Apex Legends Season 2, Battlefield 5. Actually, you know what? Now that I'm looking at this list of games, I might raise them up at least 1 tier, maybe 2. But they also showed Sims 4 Island Living, FIFA 20, and Madden 20. And I want to say that Sims 4 looked awesome. If you're a Sims fan, I think you're probably pretty excited for the Sims 4. And that alone is probably enough to move it up 1 tier. Apex Legends, if you're an Apex Legends fan, there's a ton of you out there. I think that's definitely worth going up another tier. And then Battlefield 5 showed some really cool stuff. They have a lot of content planned for that game. So I'm going to go ahead and pull them up to C+. Would have maybe been a B if Star Wars Jedi was a better showing. I just don't have a lot of faith in that game. It doesn't look challenging, and overall, I can't even say it looks fun. It's probably a good story, but I remember games like Star Wars Force Unleashed, which was awesome. I loved playing that game, and it looked very similar. The thing is, though, is that I feel like even though they look about the same, I feel like Star Wars The Force Unleashed had more like challenge. It had more like actions and more things you could do, and it looked a lot more fun. So I'm just gonna say, I'll have to wait and see on Star Wars Jedi, but let's go ahead and give EA a C+. And I didn't think anybody would be above, will be below EA except for maybe PlayStation, but Konami is down there because they only had 2 games. So I'm gonna say that's fitting. I think that's fitting. So moving on, there's 2 left. There are 2. There's 2 developers left on the list that I need to talk about. First one being Square Enix. Square Enix did exactly what they needed to do for this year's E3. They came out on stage and the first thing they showed was Final Fantasy VII Remake. That was freaking amazing. I couldn't even believe what I was seeing, first of all, and the fact that we have a release date of March 3rd is unbelievable. That was one of the first ones that made me like actually emotional. Not only that, but they followed up that trailer with I think Life is Strange, and they talked about Life is Strange, which I was already emotional. That just pulled every heartstring in my body. I couldn't even contain myself. Like, I know you guys didn't see my live stream, or if you did, maybe you saw me trying to hide it, but it was hard. It was hard to hide it. But Final Fantasy VII was the only game they needed to show, and they showed it, and they did a great job. They revealed Tifa as of course a playable character, because we all know she's playable. And they also revealed the release date, which is great. Not only that, but they also showed some information on Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers. They showed off Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, which I'm super excited for that one. Final Fantasy VIII Remastered is coming out, which no one expected, because Square seems to forget about Final Fantasy VIII or Final Fantasy VIII in general. So Remastered makes sense. Dragon Quest Builders looks pretty fun. They also showed off Circuit Superstars, War of the Visions for Final Fantasy Brave Exvius, Romancing Saga 3, Scarlet Grace, Last Remnant, and Trials of Mana, the Collection of Mana coming to Switch. So they had one of the best shows of E3. It was emotional. It was a roller coaster. It was fun, and I was gushing that whole night. I was super excited. And the only thing that would have been better, before I get to the only thing that would have been better, I'm dropping them in the S tier because I think that's exactly where they belong for this year's E3. They will probably have a good showing next year too, because I think that Final Fantasy game they did mention is going to be split into 2 games. So next year they're probably going to show a lot of that, which is totally cool. But the only company that could have done anything better did. And of course that company is none other than Nintendo. So I'm going to drop Nintendo in the S tier just right off the bat, because honestly, Nintendo came out and they did the things that I needed to see. They showed off at the end of the whole Nintendo Direct. They showed off the Breath of the Wild 2, that they are working on Breath of the Wild sequel, which is amazing. Breath of the Wild was awesome, so I can't wait to see a sequel. They showed Luigi's Mansion 3, which we'd already seen some things on that, but they showed off a lot more gameplay and revealed more about that game. Pokemon Sword and Shield, of course they showed that. There's a new release date, and they also did some gameplay for that too, showing the more open worlds. Link's Awakening, they showed that and had more gameplay. Mario Maker 2 had a new trailer, which is coming out at the end of this month. Marvel Ultimate Alliance they showed off, which was cool. Cadence of Hyrule actually looks more interesting now because it is a rhythm-based Zelda game, which I didn't think would be cool, but now that I've seen more, I'm actually kind of excited. Fire Emblem 3 Houses for the Fire Emblem fans out there. Dragon Quest 11 Echoes of an Elusive Age. They also showed off the main character from that game being in Smash Ultimate as downloadable content. Awesome. Dragon Quest Builders 2, of course that's already been talked about, but it's coming to Switch. No More Heroes 3 is coming out. Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games. And then Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6. Those were all games Nintendo showed. They had a really good showing. All those games may not stand much on their own, but together they make a great show. But not only all of that, not only all of those games, they showed off another downloadable character for Smash Ultimate, which nobody expected. Well, I guess some of us were hoping, but no one expected. And that, of course, is Banjo-Kazooie. Banjo-Kazooie was a staple on the N64, one of the greatest platformers of all time. Mario 64 came out, and then Banjo-Kazooie came out a year or two later and did everything Mario 64 did, but did it better. And it was so much fun to play. Banjo-Tooie was even better. I mean, those games were so much fun to play and so awesome. And wanting to have Banjo-Kazooie on Smash Ultimate as a downloadable character was probably in the backs of everybody's mind, and we all hoped and we all dreamed for a day where that could be possible. And Microsoft hinted at it a few times, but never came out and said it. And now here we are, post E3, and Banjo-Kazooie is coming to Smash Ultimate as a playable, downloadable fighter. Couldn't be more excited. And that if that was all they showed at E3, that's enough, right? That's amazing. But that wasn't it. They also showed off the sequel to one of my favorite games of all time, Animal Crossing New Horizons, coming to the Nintendo Switch in March. And the game, they showed gameplay, they showed all kinds of just more details about the game. There was a trailer. I mean, I was so emotional during this trailer, and I couldn't even contain myself. It was amazing. So I have to say, they did a great job. Nintendo came out of the gate and did everything they were supposed to do, and they deserve their spot on the top in the S plus or in the S category for E3 presentations. I want to say that I am a Nintendo fan, so maybe I'm a little bit biased. However, I don't think that I would give them any extra points for my love. I mean, they could have not shown Animal Crossing. They could have not shown Banjo, and all those other games would not have been enough to be an S tier. But because of Animal Crossing, because of Banjo, because of Breath of the Wild sequel, because of showing off another downloadable character from Dragon Age for Smash Ultimate, and then of course Marvel Ultimate Alliance, Mario Maker 2, Pokemon Sword and Shield, Luigi's Mansion, Mario and Sonic. I mean, there's a bunch of games coming out for the Switch that look awesome. So I think personally they deserve the place on the top tier. In fact, I think they're number one. I'm not sure if this means anything, but I switched places. Number one, Nintendo, far and away. Number two, Square Enix. Number three, Microsoft. I'm gonna switch these up a little bit. I don't think these. Yeah, this is about right. In fact, I don't even know if Sega deserves that spot. Now I'm looking at it again. Yeah, they're fine. Okay, Sega deserves that spot. So Ubisoft, followed by 2K Games, followed by Sega. Then, of course, we have CD Projekt Red with Cyberpunk, and then Namco Bandai, followed by EA, followed by Konami, and then, of course, the one I expected to be there that didn't show up was Sony. Of course, I knew they weren't going to be there, but I still think it's worth mentioning because they should have been. They didn't have to because all the other developers talked about their games for them, but I feel like they still should have had a presence or something. But it's all good. So anyway, let me know if I missed anything, or if you guys want to talk about Bethesda, let me know how their presentation went. I wish I was more of a Bethesda fan, but I'm sorry, I'm just not. So you have to forgive me on that. But if I missed anything, or maybe there's something that you wanted to talk about, feel free to post it in the comments below. Hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll be back with more E3 content. Maybe not E3 content, but I'll be back with more Animal Crossing content for sure. But thanks for stopping by, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll catch you on the flippity flip.